Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the committee meeting for the Home City House for May 6th. We've got an agenda before you. Sure we've got that. We can get things underway. Councillor Hibbs.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. You can always count on me. Can we please adopt the agenda as presented?
Thank you very much. All those in favor? Thank you. Well, it's certainly a pleasure to have members from the Wolf Creek International Learning Program here with us tonight. And it's a rather large contingent, so I'm assuming that Mr. Mark McQuinney was the Assistant Superintendent of Learning Services. Yep. If you would care to come up here and take the front microphone. You've been here a time or two before, so you know the process.
Okay.
And certainly if there's other members of your team, I'll let you introduce them and bring them up as you so choose.
Great. Well, thank you for having us here tonight. Behind me I have an enthusiastic group of students. These are students that represent students in our Wolf Creek International Learning Program. So tonight you'll hear a little bit about that work. I'm just going to begin with a few opening comments about that, how we got started, etc. This program came as a result of parent feedback through a community engagement process. And so they asked us to provide more diverse and authentic learning opportunities for students. So we started to investigate what we could do in regards to international exchange and cooperation. And what's unique about this program is it is the only one that's a kindergarten to grade 12 official memorandum of understanding between the provincial ministry in Guangdong province in China and with Alberta Education here in Alberta. So we're privileged as Wolf Creek to be the first K-12 school division to enact this agreement between Guangdong and Alberta. And we will share a little bit about our outbound programs and our inbound programs because we have both represented here behind me. So to kick things off, we're going to share a short little video. This video is about 2.5 minutes long, and it talks about the trip that 24 students from Wolf Creek took in March of 2019, and then the rest of the presentation will be student sharing.
So my name is Robin McEachern. I am the Wolf Creek International Learning Program teacher. Thanks for having us tonight. As you saw from the video, that was an opportunity of a lifetime for a lot of our students. We visited China, starting off in Hong Kong for a few days, and then traveling to mainland China, to Guangzhou. Our students spent their days filled with activities prepared by the program and our sister partnership. And then in the evenings, we're in homestay families and did activities in the evenings and on the weekends with them. So I have Keanu Sacco, who is going to talk a little bit about his opportunities with his homestay family. We also had several visits during the week with several schools where students had prepared in advance through coursework to share about their communities from Alberta and the province of Alberta. So we had students sharing with students and classes in China. So it was a wonderful opportunity for everybody. But I will turn it over to Keanu.
Robin?
Yes.
If I could just make a suggestion.
Absolutely.
One of the pitfalls we have with our online broadcasting is that the cameras all project from that way. And I'm just wondering, prior to them speaking, if they could just come around on the inside of the table here and just look back that way and at least just say their name and whatnot, because I expect that their families back home would be interested in seeing them as well.
Sounds good.
So
Okay.
just as an introduction to start with.
Yeah,
please.
sounds good.
Hi, my name is Keanu Sacco. I'm from the Lacombe Composite and I'm in grade 11. Just go back. Do that. Thanks, Keanu. So my overall experience at my homestay experience in China was really exciting. It was really amazing. At first, I was really nervous that because I haven't seen them before, I've only gotten very few little information about them. But after a couple of days of spending time with them, my interactions with them became more natural. So one of the places, a couple of the places where they took me to museums, historical sites, went for archery, watched a movie together, and walked around the parks nearby, which was really exciting for me. They also took me to a lot of restaurants around, which showcased a lot of traditional Cantonese cuisine, which I really enjoyed. I had the chance to try hot pot, duck, traditional noodles and dumplings, and I also had pigeon for the first time. Yeah, it tasted like chicken. So I was comfortable with that. So one of the things I appreciated most about my homestay experience was that I was able to have a connection and relationship with my homestay family. They were very loving and caring, and they were always looking out for me. So just for one of the examples, on one of the particular mornings, I wasn't really feeling well, like I had stomach pains. And once I told them about it, they offered me congee, which was a rice porridge which had like different vegetables. They told me that if you ate this, later on in the afternoon you'll feel a lot better, which I did feel a lot better. So yeah, and also beforehand we did, as Robin mentioned, we did a module work, and I had to do a couple of research about one of the historical sites in Guangzhou. With my homestay family, as we actually visited the place, they gave me more information about it, which I feel like is one of the most important parts of this program, is to not only just experience the culture, but also learn. Right. And I am really grateful that they did that. And that's all I have to say.
Thank you. Good job, Keanu. So I think I'm Well, I won't be able to face you all. Okay. So that was Keanu speaking about homestay in China. But we also offer different programs throughout the year as well, and we're actually coming up on our second summer program. So in the summer, we welcome students from China. Last year, we actually welcomed 65 students to the Lacombe area, and this year we're looking to welcome around the same number. We also partner them with ambassadors from our schools. So the ambassadors in our schools really work together with the students, and they get to do that culture sharing and the experience of working with students from a different place, so they have the opportunity to practice their English, and they provide that support to help with jet lag and to build those instant friendships. So I'm going to turn it over to Emily. Emily, if you want to come join me up here. And Emily's going to talk a bit about the summer program.
So I'm Emily Mueller. I'm a grade 12 student at Lacombe Composite High School. So my initial draw to being a student ambassador is definitely the prospect of being able to go to China. But upon researching more of the program and filling in the application, it was more about touring Alberta and being a host to students coming from China. But then right from day one, it was so much more than that. We got to build amazing friendships with our buddies and with the other ambassadors too, and we all grew so much together through those experiences and sharing those experiences through the eyes of an international student. So being an ambassador this summer definitely helped me feel more prepared when traveling to China. We kind of got to see those cultural differences a bit more, so when we arrived there was less culture shock. However, there was still lots to get adjusted to, but we had a better understanding of the language barrier and how we should speak and present while we were there. The International Learning Program over the summer helped me develop my leadership skills and just my confidence and become more outgoing through the interactions we had and the presentations we did and all the excursions we took the students on. So that was definitely one of the highlights and definitely one of the big learning opportunities for the entire program. So I'm incredibly grateful for that opportunity.
Good afternoon. My name is Sean Lawheath. I'm the Director of Learning for Wolf Creek Public Schools, and I'm very fortunate to be able to be working in this program with these students. So I'm just going to talk a few minutes about our 5-month program. Currently, we have 15 students here in grades 6, 7, and 8 that are attending some of our schools for a little bit longer stay program. So instead of just getting a small taste in the summer, they're actually here for a longer period of time, directly infused in our classrooms, working directly with our students, learning about the educational system here. Many of the families that sent their children over actually were in North America for a period of time and have gone back, and they want that same opportunity for their kids. And so they do want to see what the educational opportunities are here within Alberta. And so by having the kids come for a 5-month stay, they get a far greater taste, their English levels go up dramatically, and that's one of the key pieces of the 5-month. Even with our young students here, you'll see how strong their English is, and that's grown month by month. Each time they're using it on a continuous basis, whether it's with friends, whether it's with each other, or with their students, with other students and staff, they're growing that language. And again, they're starting to understand culturally at a far greater level than what they learned in kind of a 2-week period. Also, many of these students could be looking at coming for a longer term, where they could be looking at going for 3 years or even post-secondary. So we've been very fortunate having these tremendous young people with us. My own son actually has Catherine in his class and knows what an incredible opportunity is both for our students and for our Chinese guests. So thank you.
I think I don't need mic, thanks. Well, am I going to pitch you guys to introduce myself, or?
No, just face that way if you would, and that way everyone can see you at home as well.
Thanks.
Okay?
Hi, I'm Dr. Leung from C1 Foreign Language School back in Canton, and I'm studying in junior high right now, and I'm in grade 8.
So why did you want to participate in the Wolf Creek program?
Well, basically, at first I'm just kind of take this as a really long English camping activity, kind of like increase my language abilities, but after I got here, basically the knowledge I get are the cultures here, and I'm just experiencing a brand new culture to me, and I find it is really interesting. though I like the Cantonese food better.
And what school are you attending?
Sorry.
What school do you go to?
Right here, Nakun Junior High.
And can you tell us about what life is like at school?
Well, I think the main point I need to talk about is the first and second month because I'm not really familiar here. Basically, just a couple of ambassadors, including, how to say, Friendly, Emily, and Keanu. Actually, they're really helpful. Well, basically, my teachers and my classmates in class, they helped me a lot with my language trouble. And you can imagine, like, I can't even know what my teacher is saying during social in LA, and it's kind of like struggle for me. Well, fortunately, I got my friends to help me. And for the following month, I think you guys can imagine that just like a normal student here, and I'm really glad that they didn't just trick me, especially no matter good or bad, because I'm just from another country, not a citizen here, and I'm really grateful for that.
Awesome, thanks, Dirk.
So certainly if council has any questions that they'd like to ask after they've done their speech, certainly feel free to do so.
Thank you. Yeah,
For
thank
sure.
you. So Chino, can you tell us about some of the things you have done in Alberta and Lacombe?
With our teachers, like Martins and Jamie's, we went to like University of Alberta, and then we went to the West Edmonton Mall and go shopping. We also like watched the dance competition in art center.
Very good. And what have you done with your homestay family?
It's like, we make sausage with our home families, and then we also spend our times with our home sisters, and we join their parties, and then we have their like birthday parties and many different activities.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing.
Thank you.
Thank you. So Catherine, can you talk about your classes and your friends in school?
I'm very happy to join in this class because my teacher is very kind. She's just like my mom. She helped me a lot, and all my classmates is very helpful. They always want to help me and they want to make friends with me. So I usually pray with them. I'm very happy to stay with them together.
Thank you. That's wonderful. Thanks for sharing. Icy, can you talk a little bit about your homestay family and what you do with them?
Sure.
My homestay family is very nice. They always take me to like around the home or somewhere else. They take me to the Calvary Tower, and also they take me to go shopping, which is like can buy a lot. And my host family sister is very nice. She always takes me to she always take me on traveling, or she take me to make some food, which makes me happy.
That's wonderful. So what have you learned since you've been living in Lacombe?
Like culture.
Yeah. What about culture? Anything in particular? What do you do at mealtime? Is mealtime any different at your Lacombe house instead of in your China house?
Mealtime is not so much different, but at school mealtime we always get longer time. I always have a rest after that.
Good. Thank you for sharing. Thank you.
So thank you again for hosting us. We're certainly willing to entertain any questions that you might have for the students or for the staff. We just appreciate the opportunity to share. This program is only a year old now. We started it back in March 2018. So We've had 75 students from China come so far in 1 year, either through summer programs or the program you heard about just now. And we're already planning another summer program, fall programs, and then a March 2020 trip as well for our own students to go back again. So lots of things to continue here with this important work. So we turn it back to you. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. There's been a drastic improvement in the English that I heard from a short time ago from some of these youngsters, so congratulations on that. I think that deserves a big round of applause. Did anyone from council have any questions for any of our students? Councillor Gullickson.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. I'd just like to welcome everybody from China. We visited China a couple of years ago, and one of the things that we were told is that your school's a lot harder than our schools. Do you agree with that? Yeah. So you kind of like our school a lot better, right? So when you're in China, how many hours a day did you have for homework? Quite a few?
Go ahead, Gino. Yeah.
So it's like we are like with primary school and junior high, it's a difference. Maybe in primary school it's easier, so maybe
No.
some of the primary school will be easier. Like only will study at, we can, many students that if you can study well, you can finish it like about 8 homework. But in junior highs, it's like most of the time we need to like 11 o'clock, even 12 o'clock.
You sure about that?
Maybe not for you.
For some people.
So it's a lot more work in China than to go to school, right? That's what they told us, that the students work very hard there. So I hope you're enjoying your stay here before you go back.
Thank you.
Ken, you mentioned that you were certainly well looked after at your time in China, and I thank you for mentioning that, because that was certainly some concerns that were brought forward from some parents that were sending their children off to a foreign country, and I think that is the same type of feeling that was echoed from their counterparts in China, so hopefully that'll go a long ways in alleviating some of those fears, so thank you. Councillor Hibbs.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. So, I mean, I love it when we have students that come and present to council. I really love this program. I think it's fascinating. I hope that it continues and is very successful. I guess I just like to sort of draw attention to the fact that you do have the opportunity right now to sort of, I don't know, put a plug in, I guess, as to how it is that you know, what you're looking for in host families, because of course this whole program is really reliant on, you know, community involvement, because I don't think this is just something that just the school can do. It's you know, it's requiring help from the community. So I guess I'd love to give you the opportunity to kind of put that out there, what it is that you're looking for in a host family, you know, relatively how relatively easy it is to become one, and so how people would let you know that they're maybe interested in that. So I just love to give you that opportunity.
Yeah, thank you so much. There was a recent Lacombe Globe article as well that talked about our trip, and at the end of that, we put a little plug in there about host families, because these students that you heard from today are all staying in a Lacombe or Black Falls community, and so they are living in our communities. It's very easy to become a host family. You can simply find us on our website, wolfcreekinternational.ca. There's a link for hosting. They integrate right into your home. They do the same activities that you are doing. It can be a older couple that's an empty nester, it could be a young family, it could be a single person without children that is interested in having some youth in their home. And you provide care for them, and we provide a little bit of remuneration to support food and utilities and those kinds of costs. But it is a great opportunity to bring the world into your home and to learn from these young people, because there's always lots of great sharing and community and culture that goes back and forth. Whether it's the 2-week program in the summer or whether it's a 5-month program or 10-month program during the school year. So we certainly invite anyone who's interested, because we're always looking for community to support our host experience. Thank you.
Councillor Connor.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. I was just looking through the folder here, and I'm just curious about the costs. Are those the costs for the kids to go there and the cost for the kids to come here? Are they borne by those families alone, or how does that work?
So as a school division, we have an international tuition fee. So those costs are borne by the Chinese families that send their students to Wolf Creek Public Schools. And we run summer programs as well at a cost. So they pay to join the summer program, much like a summer camp experience. And we take the dollars that we make off those programs and we reinvest those into subsidizing our outbound trips. So there is a cost to go outbound to China, but it's significantly subsidized through those programs where we're hosting students from our two countries. And then when they're in China, they're also staying in host families, as you heard. So those costs are supported that way as well in a reciprocal manner.
Anyone else? Well, thank you also very much for taking time out and coming to visit us. We appreciate it. I hope that the remainder of your trip is an overwhelming success, and we look forward to many more exchanges. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So next up, we have our Community Standards Bylaw 468. So Director Piche, if you'd like to go through the public consultation results with us, please.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. Before Council tonight is the results of the Community Standards Bylaw Survey, and it's to be presented as information. There were 2 streams of the survey, one for businesses and one for residents. On the business side, there were 29 responses, and on the resident side, there was 349 responses. Some of the questions were focused on the changes that Council provided as direction from an earlier meeting in December. Specifically questions about the unsightly premises definition, noise, light pollution, and excessive idling, and they were included on both surveys. Also included were questions regarding the applicability of certain clauses of the old Community Standards Bylaw. Some of the responses were fairly one-sided, where there was about an 80-20 split, such as in the times and intent of garage sales. And then there were others that were quite evenly split, like the times observed for quiet hours, and they were about 45 to 55% split. There was very much healthy participation on the open-ended questions, as you can see in the responses there, but both are positive and negative. For the open-ended questions that were asked for specific times or temperatures on certain questions in the areas of noise, excessive idling, and curfew, I summarized the responses into tables to provide Council with some quantitative numbers, so you can see where residents feel what is acceptable for certain items. At this time, if there are any questions regarding the survey, I'd be happy to answer any of those questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Piche. Councillor Hibbs.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. I did really appreciate having access to this report. I just only have just one question, actually, and that is, given the results of these, survey responses, will administration be making changes to the bylaw before it's brought next week, or will it just be brought back as is? And then these are the things that we're meant to ruminate about and then potentially pursue at that time.
Yeah, that's exactly it. We'll just present the bylaw as is, as what it was after first reading, and then based on what you guys have gleaned out of these responses, you can make and recommend changes at that point.
Councillor Hoekstra.
Thanks, Mayor Creasy. So it was entertaining reading. I really, really appreciated all the responses from the public. It was excellent. I guess I was wondering if you could clarify for anybody, for us, what the purpose of a bylaw is and why cities set up bylaws, because I think there was some questions about we're overstepping our boundaries, and so I really would like a public, I don't know, description of bylaw. Then secondly, enforcement of bylaws, is that only done by bylaw officers or is it also done by the police? And then if I can respond after that too, that would be great.
I'll start with the police one first. In terms of responding by police, they are eligible to, they have the authority to write tickets on municipal bylaws. Specifically with the community standards bylaw that was presented back in 2013 when it was initially put in, it was specifically for police at that time. And basically the purpose of bylaws are to be able to enforce law or rules and standards of the community that we want to set, and it is through council that it is set. Through the MGA, there is the authority for you guys to do so.
Thanks, Patrice. Because the reason I asked about enforcement, for one, was how can we set curfews if bylaw officers don't work in the evening? So people need to have that understanding that both our police or the officers could be enforcing this, and that's why it's okay to have that within this this overall bylaw. And yeah, and I just thank you for that clarification. I'll leave it there.
Anyone else? Councillor Ross.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. In regards to pertaining to the unsightly properties, and I completely respect there's far more in-depth process of enforcing it than most of us probably know, but is there anywhere to create more in-depth of bylaw to aid the city and the administration to make the process faster? Or like, because it's just not as simple as we all think. I know some residents would love to see these properties acted upon more in a faster way, but I'm assuming there's a long process to that.
If I may, so my answer actually ties in with Councillor Hoekstra's question too. So the reason for a bylaw, for municipal bylaw, is to provide any of the services or to enact any of the purposes of a municipality, which are defined in the Municipal Government Act. So they have recently updated them. It's always been to provide good government. They've recently added to foster the well-being of the environment, to provide services, facilities, or other things that, in the opinion of council, are necessary or desirable for all who are part of the community, develop and maintain safe and viable communities, and work collaboratively with your neighbors to provide those services. So, as a council, you can pass a bylaw in any area that you think delivers these, and it is fairly broad purposes, right? It's kind of like anything you think is for the good of the community, you can pass a bylaw about it, with the disclaimer that a municipality has only been given certain authorities through the province, through the Municipal Government Act. And anything that acts outside of those authorities can be deemed to be, like, typically the issue is, it's called ultra virus, where you tried to legislate in an area that you have no ability to legislate in. So if we were to say, in Lacombe, murder is the death penalty, we don't have the power to do that because that's not something that a municipality has the right to legislate in that area. And so to get to your question, Councillor Ross, that's sort of the issue that we face when you're trying to deal with unsightly properties, is that you can issue tickets. You could have a very, very strict bylaw, and there is municipalities in Canada that have bylaws about how old the paint can be, and your shingles have to be in good repair, and a lot of really highly restrictive standards. And if people voluntarily choose to follow those standards, then it's kind of like it's all good. But if you have to go to a spot where you are physically coming in and removing property or modifying someone's property and really infringing on those charter rights that every individual has, then the municipality's bylaws are kind of irrelevant. They will look to what the provincial standard is, and so however we define it, it doesn't really matter. If it comes to an actual enforcement action that you're kind of like pushed all the way to court, they will only look at provincial definitions, and ours don't really matter. So it's kind of a hard end, because when it comes to issuing a ticket and taking minor actions, you could have as much specificity in your bylaw as you want, but it doesn't help you actually address those really egregious properties like we've dealt with in the past, where you're actually going in and physically entering someone's property against their desire. You have to meet a higher standard, and the standard is unsafe, detrimentally impacting the property values of neighbors. Those are only two. Do you know if there's a third? I want to say it's only those two. It's like it's a really high standard before you can go. That's my long-winded answer.
Anything else you'd care to add, Director PJ? So I will say that I did take some time to go through all of the results and whatnot, and I found it a little interesting when some of the same responses are given within 8 or 10 minutes several times over repeatedly. That makes one question if in fact it's different people, especially when they're worded identically. But anyway, that aside, there seems to be quite a variance in what people think is appropriate. So we've certainly got our work cut out to try and strike a balance in this one, I think, on several areas. But I'm sure we're up for the task. Does anybody have anything else they'd care to add? Councillor Gullickson.
I just would like, were you happy with the response time?
Absolutely. The numbers I was thrilled with. We've put surveys out in the past, and if we've gotten 25, that was good. When I started seeing the numbers really climb the first few days, I was like, ooh. But no, I was extremely happy with these numbers.
So, I mean, that's nice, and it gives us a good cross-section, I think, of, like you say, a lot of them are the same, but I think that many responses shows that there's a lot of interest in the community for some changes here that we need to address. Good.
Councillor Hoekstra.
Thanks, Mayor Creasy. So I went through all the responses too and started kind of grouping them in my mind or on paper too. But you have summarized in the tables a lot of the results. Is that all we should consider, or should we be tabulating these responses somewhat ourselves?
If there are other tabulations you want me to see over the next week, I can do that over the next little bit if need be. But the comments themselves, I didn't take a tally of positive versus negative or anything like that. But anything where we asked for something quantitative, I know we ended up getting a lot of verbiage when it was like what temperature or what time and such like that. But I took all those times and I took all those responses, and that's what I put in those tables for you.
Chief Cody.
I'm sorry, that was just not done.
Not a problem. I said, no worries. Anyone else? Director Thompson, you've been hard at work assembling some proposed changes for Bylaw 400. Do you care to take us through that report?
Definitely was not all me, so I'll invite Manager Bonnet and Planner Kirchner up to the table as well. And thank you. The administration is presenting tonight amendments or proposed amendments to the city's land use bylaw in response to council's strategic goals 4.1.1b and 4.1.2a1, links to which are included in council's report. Since the adoption of Council's strategic plan, administration has been documenting feedback heard from council, permit applicants, and developers in order to have a clear understanding of where improvements to local land development regulation is most desired. In the process, staff also underwent a detailed review of the current land use bylaw. In total, we are presenting tonight over 50 proposed amendments. While we welcome Council's feedback, ideas, and general comments on whether the amendments sufficiently address the intent of the two goals in Council's strategic plan, tonight we would first like to focus on getting an understanding from Council on which amendments are supported as is, which are not supported at this time or require more information, and which are more neutral to Council for us to amend. This will help us understand where additional information is required prior to bringing forward a bylaw or a couple bylaws prior to first reading. It will also influence how we structure the bylaws moving forward, the amending bylaws moving forward. For example, we may proceed with one bylaw that has more supported amendments that are separate from one that has amendments that may need more debate or may be impactful to the actual land use regulation in Macomb. So in order to indicate how we're going to do that, I'm going to just turn it over briefly to CIO Gowdy just to indicate and how Council can indicate to us over the course of the presentation where their support lies.
Thank you. So as Director Thompson identified, there is over 50 items that we're suggesting or proposing for amendments on the land use bylaw. Councillor Connick will recall some of the painful line-by-lines that we've had before on the land use bylaw. And in kind of an interest to be able to focus your discussion around the items where there is more interest or controversy or there's more research needed, I looked into some sort of decision-making tools we could use this evening to help us sort through those and really let you focus in the future on the items that you want to focus on. So what we're proposing tonight is that Planner Kirchner is going to go through the proposed change. So I'm going to just use the first one as an example, which is required parking pads located in the front yard need to be hard surface. So Jen will propose that. She'll give the rationale, which she's given for each item. I don't think we need to go through the current on each one. We can read that. She'll give the rationale, and then we will ask for an indication. And so in the past, we've had things where we hold these like straw votes for at the committee meeting. It really doesn't meet with the Municipal Government Act. If you're making decisions like that, it really counts as a council meeting at that point. So what we have proposed is that we would actually just use this as an indication of whether there's general alignment, general opposition, or whether there's a need for further discussion or research. And so we're asking for a thumbs up for, I like that, that should be in the final bylaw. Thumbs down, I don't like the proposed change and don't think it should be in the final bylaw. And then a thumb to the side is, I'm not sure, I want to talk about it more, or I'd like to have more research, or actually I kind of have ambivalent about that one, I don't really care. That's going to let us sort of sort these into areas where there is general consent or general alignment amongst council. We'll bring forward one bylaw that addresses those items with those proposed changes where we think there's general alignment, and then separately we'll be bringing forward the items where there's a need for more discussion. So that'll let us sort of process this through two streams. If that's acceptable with council, that's what we would ask, is that Jen's going to present, and then we'll be looking for a thumbs up, a thumbs down, or a thumbs sideways. Again, acknowledging that is not a final decision. It does not prevent you from changing your mind or asking questions later. It just helps us sort how can we make sure we focus our time together. Amendments first, or sure. Councilor James.
I'm just rebooting the computer.
No problem, all that goes with Councillor Jacobson's got a question.
Yeah, okay, so just to be clear then, you're actually not looking for discussion on these items tonight, you're just looking for that indication and you want to have discussion later?
That's ideally yes, because if we have discussion on each of the 50 items, I think 35 of them will be wasting time probably because there's general alignment anyway, and then 15 of them we won't have enough time. So tonight we're just saying, here's some proposed changes. Feel free to give us any feedback, but to be able to make it through in a timely way, let's set there for now. Those are our thoughts.
I don't think that council will actually be interested in commenting on them all, but certainly if there's some that you need some clarification on in order to make an informed decision, whether or not in fact you agree or disagree with it, then that would be fine to do. Is there some in particular that...
No, and maybe just one more point of clarification. So in terms of your graphing or recording this, if you only want a thumb sideways if we're just ambivalent about it, or you want a thumb sideways if we potentially would support it but we need more information, or would that qualify as a thumb down?
A thumb sideways. And in terms of recording it, actually, we are recording it, and that's what we're going to use. We're going to go back and actually look at sort of what the general feel is. So we're going to record each one, we'll go back and look at it.
I made all these notes, I was prepared to bring the heat tonight, but I guess
I wanted to see it.
Councillor Connick?
Well, my only comment will be is I think I'm going to be thumb sideways for everything, because to me, I think a lot of this has to go back to the development community first, does it not? Like, I mean, there's some significant setback changes we're suggesting for commercial properties that I'm thinking, well, like, to go from 3 meters to 18 meters, I don't know if I can properly, like, personally, I'd like to go, I know the timeline here is May 7th to the 10th, it goes to development community. I would rather hear from them first before because I don't think I'm properly prepared to make any sort of changes on this, because again, as our CEO has alluded to, I've been through this once before, and we spent a lot of time on it, and I thought we had it right. Apparently we didn't, and I'm not so sure if we'll get it right this time either. Like, this is one of these bylaws that you're never going to make everyone happy, but that's my only thoughts. I don't know.
I would suggest that you vote however you choose, but keep in mind that we are going to have input, additional input from the development community, and that just because we give an indication of how we may feel on an item this evening does not preclude it from being changed as we move forward. Chief Gowdy?
Yes, that's what I was going to say, is that no matter what, you won't be making any decisions today. All this is doing is help us draft the first reading of a bylaw. So we want to make sure it's kind of as good as it can be when we bring the first reading, but I fully expect there'll be lots of debate and changes after.
Take it away.
Well, thank you for that introduction. So we do have one section in here that just simply speaks to minor amendments. So these are things like removing of asterisks, updating the table of contents, updating the reference to one of our newer districts to the appropriate spots. We're not planning on going through those examples thoroughly. They're just there, and they would be forming part of whatever bylaw we'd be bringing forward, because they're really more technical changes that make the bylaw more user-friendly and helps organize things in a bit more of an improved way. And also because whenever we change anything, even removing an asterisk, it has to show up as an official bylaw amendment. So there's just that section, but we'll really be focusing on the things that are larger changes that in theory would alter how development would happen. So the first one is under our residential category, and this is just for general residential that happens anywhere within the community. Requiring parking pads located in the front yard to be hard surfaced, and this will the rationale for this is to make sure that we have a standard hard surfacing requirement for all types of parking that occur in the front yard of a property. It'll also prevent us from having gravel parking pads that are connected to hard surface streets, so it'll reduce the amount of gravel that's being dragged onto the city street, and it'll just improve the overall look of the residential development in the area with that type of consistency.
fine, but you need to ask us when you want us to give our thumbs.
Yeah, thumbs? Okay, the second one is in regards to multi-attached housing. We wanted to add a condition that multi-attached housing may be required to provide enhanced screening when it's located adjacent to a detached dwelling. So this would provide a better privacy buffer between existing detached dwellings, so single-family homes, and multi-attached, traditionally infill development. So this would be particularly beneficial in scenarios where currently there is a natural buffer created by large shrubs or trees, but due to the requirements of the infill development, they've had to remove those trees from the lot in order to facilitate the development of the site. So this would provide the option for development officers to require that additional consideration be made so that there is that level of privacy that had currently existed on those lots will continue in the future.
So you're talking, other than a fence, you're talking trees?
Potentially. Thumbs?
I'm sideways for everyone, so just, seriously.
Okay, the next one is an accessory residential building not containing a garden suite should not be more than 4.6 meters in height and should not exceed the height of the principal building. And this is essentially taking that statement. It's currently a shall to a should, and this will provide the opportunity for these types of applications to be heard by the Municipal Planning Commission rather than being applications that simply have to be rejected by the department. So it would be for scenarios where perhaps there's an existing accessory building that is already oversized. The individual needs to replace it because it's no longer in good condition, and they'd like to replace it with something similar, despite the fact that our current standard would say no.
So, for the benefit of all council and those watching at home, could you give us a brief rundown of the differences between shall and should as it applies to this bylaw?
So essentially, shall is you absolutely must do it. The Development Department and the Planning Commission cannot waive that requirement. Whereas should provides flexibility that they can make a judgment call as to whether it would be an appropriate condition to enforce or whether it might not be appropriate in that scenario. Okay, vote. Okay. If a front attached garage is not provided, all parking shall be provided from the lane. If no lane is provided, there shall be a side yard setback of 3 meters to allow for parking and/or a garage to be located at the rear of the lot. So this is just speaking to the desire to encourage parking to be directed towards the rear of the property in cases where there is no front attached garage being provided. With new development, we typically see that occurring anyway. Most new development areas tend to have front attached garage and have that type of parking provided. But with infill development, traditionally that larger houses that are being removed, they would not have had a large amount of front yard parking. They may have utilized the laneway to provide a garage or located their parking at the rear. And this would encourage that existing streetscape where there's minimal parking at the front to be continued with new development. So maintaining the existing character of the neighborhood. So the vote?
Just before we do that, I'm just a little confused. So if a front attached garage is not provided and there's no lane, then a side yard setback of 3 meters to allow for parking the garage at the rear. So basically we're just saying that you want a 3-meter wide driveway then?
Or, well, making sure that you have that space at the side of your yard. Because often, after the fact, they might want to add a garage, and this will provide them enough space so that if they require more parking area, they are still able to access the rear of their property from the front, from the street. So,
thank you.
Yeah. So, vote. Okay. The next one is in regards to secondary suites. So a secondary suite shall occupy no more than the equivalent of 90% of the main floor of the principal dwelling. So this would allow for more flexibility. Currently there is a maximum space that is much more limited for secondary suites, and this would enable better use of an existing building, more flexibility for the size of suites and different types of suites that might be provided in the community. So, a vote on that one. Okay. The next one is a garden suite shall be no larger than 75 meters squared. So this is just currently changing how we, I guess, lay out what the size requirement is. You currently have a standard that connects it to 40% of the total floor area of the principal dwelling. So this will provide more flexibility, particularly for those larger lots in our downtown where there may not be infill redevelopment occurring. But this could provide more flexibility for them to build a larger garden suite at the rear of their property, maintain that principal dwelling unit, so that streetscape, but provide different infill, opportunities for them, some of those more historic lots. So think 50th Avenue, where dark pretty much lays out that the community wants to see those houses maintained. This will provide those owners with a bit more flexibility, to have a bit larger of a garden suite and use that large space better. So if there's a vote on that. Okay. Parking spaces for garden and secondary suites will be based strictly on the number of bedrooms provided, and tandem parking may be allowed. So the thought there is that with principal dwellings, tandem parking is allowed. So this would be, let's say you have a garage and you have the driveway in front of it, and one vehicle's in the garage and one's on the street or on the driveway. That would be tandem parking. So by allowing it, you would allow the developer or the owner to maybe provide one parking stall within a garage and one on the driveway for their suite tenants. So it provides a bit more flexibility with how that parking can be provided, rather than strictly two side-by-side parking stalls.
So you've got here that it'll be based on the number of bedrooms. Is that equal to, or how?
It's kind of interesting. Our current bylaw references the number of bedrooms, but also references the overall size of the suite. With most apartment units, for instance, parking is based on the number of bedroom units per suite. Deb, do you know?
I think it's, if you have a 2-bedroom, it's 2 stalls, and 3-bedroom, I think it's still 2 stalls. Like, I don't know the number just off the top of my head, but certainly in most cases you would be providing 2 stalls for, but a 1-bedroom you probably have 1 stall.
So I have a vote on that. Okay. The next one is a change to maximum parcel coverage. So we're recommending maximum parcel coverage on R5 lots shall be 65%. So currently it is 75%, as is our R6 lots. And in order to really create a better distinction between those 2 lots, which really are supposed to have different types of density in their development, we're recommending making that change so that the R5 lot would be 65%, and then the R6 lot, which is kind of that maximum density you're going to get for residential, would be 75. So it creates more of a, I guess, a more of a structured change between those types of lots, and it better reflects the types of uses you're allowed on those as well. So I'll vote on that. Okay. The next one is we're recommending adding bed and breakfast as a discretionary use to the residential light industrial district. These lots are rather large in size and can potentially support the development of bed and breakfasts. This would also provide a new opportunities for commercial developments on those lots. Vote on that. Okay. So that's kind of it for the general residential. The next is specifically residential guidelines for more infill development. So in particular, the overlays. So with a number of the overlay districts, historic residential district, medium density transition, mixed use transition, and Old Town Main Street residential district, we're proposing a unique side yard setback. So with residential, it's currently 1.5, but with infill development, so anything in our downtown area, we're suggesting 2 meters. The main reason for this is the intention of these overlays were to establish standards for more sensitive infill development in these neighborhoods. With our existing residential lots, they typically have much larger side yard setbacks than what we're seeing with new development or infill development. And by having that larger side yard minimum, it would help maintain that traditional development style we have in our downtown. So the streetscape and that view and that patterning would be maintained more and would be more sensitive infill that would be occurring. So that was our thought process behind that recommendation.
So does anybody want any of those 4 separated out, or consider them all at once? I'm going to suggest we consider them all at once, unless we hear otherwise.
Yeah, and I'd just like to add, the applicants can always, of course, apply for a variance on that, which we see with the 1.5 meters that we currently have. So it's a change to our standard, but yet again, variances can be requested. So if there's a vote for that, that would be great. Okay. The establishment of a new overlay for our central residential district. So this district currently does not have an overlay, and we're suggesting that it might be time to add one. This area does not have a specific architectural style, it's very mixed. But we feel that with more frequency of infill requests that we've been having, it would be appropriate to have something in place. So we would have some level of construction requirements. They'd be very similar to what we have in our other residential overlays. We would suggest the same 2-meter side yard setback, but we would not be requiring architectural styles to be incorporated into this area. There's just not a large patterning of certain styles, so it still provides that flexibility for different types of housing. So if there's a vote for that. Okay. So the next section is business, so more commercial and industrial. So the first one is allowing the C6 district to have the same signage as the C5 district. So C6 district was created for our Wolf Creek Crossing area, and the recommendation is it's very similar in nature to the C5. It would make sense for them to have the same type of signage allowances on there. So there's a vote on that. Okay. The next one is in regards to parking. So commercial multi-tenant lease bay buildings and district shopping centers will require 4 spaces for every 100 meters squared, or a minimum of 6 spaces per bay. So essentially in this case, we've combined those two uses and the requirements so that there's no situation where the development officers or MPC have to determine whether it should be classified as a commercial multi-tenant lease bay building or a shopping center. When it comes down to it, both of them have multiple units with different types of businesses in there occupying the same building. So this just creates a bit more consistency and ease of use for applicants and the department. So if there's a vote on that. Okay. The next one is for industrial multi-tenant lease bay buildings. Will require 1 space per 100 meters squared with a minimum of 3 spaces per bay. So this is a reduction of our current standard. The thought or rationale is that industrial uses do not have the same parking requirements or needs as commercial uses. By reducing the requirements for these multi-tenant lease bay buildings, developers will no longer need to provide parking that is not being regularly utilized. So currently it's 2 spaces per 100 and a minimum of 6. It would become 1 space per 100 and a minimum of 3. So essentially cutting the requirement in half. So there's a vote for that. Okay. We have a condition currently that prevents developers from exceeding their parking requirements by 20%. We're suggesting that that be deleted. Developers typically only provide parking in accordance with the regulations, but we feel that if a developer wishes to exceed their parking requirements, administration should be able to support that rather than flat out telling them, no thank you, we don't need it. So if there's a vote on that one. Okay. The next one is also in regards to parking. Parking regulations will not be applicable for existing buildings in the downtown commercial district, so the C1. Our existing buildings in the C1 district are traditionally unable to meet our parking requirements. Through this exemption, buildings will no longer be required to take these parking variants, will no longer be required to get parking variances to support new permitted use occupancy. So this will streamline basically the permitting process for these types of businesses that wish to open in the downtown core. So essentially really hard to make more parking where there's simply not enough space. So if I could have a vote on that. Thank you.
Can I ask a question, please?
Yeah.
Okay, pertaining to downtown, there's living suites over top of businesses that then those residences in them suites are taking up potential customer parking. And that seems to be an issue brought up that there's therefore then no parking for the customers. So is that an example of this being downtown business versus, because some of the buildings downtown have living residents over top of the businesses.
So I think that's one of the natures of mixed use development. The hope being that when the residents are using them, maybe the business doesn't need as much parking because the times are offset, that kind of thing. It wouldn't really be addressed by what's being proposed here. This is more like good neighbor coffee, where if someone were to go into their space right now that serve coffee and sweet bakery goods, they would have to go through an occupancy permit, and we would have to go through a whole other process for varying their ability to provide parking. And so we would be saying to this person, oh, actually we need to have a whole check with the community to see if they're okay with having a coffee shop here with no parking, which obviously they were, said there was no problem. And so it's been kind of a pretty constant source of frustration for us, these occupancy permits downtown. You have to tell the developer and the business owner, actually you got to wait another 3 weeks plus an appeal period for this thing that we know full well is going to go through. But it wouldn't really address what you're talking about.
Okay, sorry, because I'm not in any of these related communities or developers, so I'm a little not educated on the information.
Normally, if they want to put a suite downtown, they have parking at the rear of the building. And this, CAO Gowdy has indicated, is the front street parking is really about the only parking that's available for most of these businesses.
think we already did a vote on that one. Okay, the next one is a liquor store to be permitted use instead of discretionary in the transitional commercial district. Oh, did I miss one? Oh, I skipped a whole bunch. I guess I could sense what was coming, right? Next one is minimum front yard in neighborhood commercial district, 18 meters, and it's currently 3. So 18 meters would enable you to have enough space to provide your parking and your landscaping at the front of a lot. This ensures that the parking is being placed in a safe space that has direct access to our entrances of these buildings. The majority, we did take a look existing C2, C3, C4, and I1 uses and developments, and the vast majority of them already meet that 18-meter front yard setback. So it's not really changed from how things are currently being developed. It just encourages that pattern of development to become an actual regulation. Parking at the rear simply isn't overly useful for most of these commercial businesses. People will park on the street instead of parking behind the building and then jogging around. And of course, they can always apply for variances as well if they're not able to meet it. But we looked at quite a number of them, and we found that the vast majority, there might have only been a couple existing buildings that might have been slightly short, but I don't think we saw any that were actually 3 meters from the property line. The only place where we have that kind of minimal setback is the downtown commercial district, where they build up right to the property line. So we have the neighborhood commercials, C2, which would go from 3 to 18. Our transitional district, the C3, which would go from 4.5 to 18. C4, highway commercial district, which would go from 4.5 to 18. And then the light industrial district, which would go from 9 to 18.
Chief Covey?
Excuse me, so under the original land use bylaw 400, the thought was at that time that we really want, as a community, Macomb really wanted to see parking developed in the rear of properties so that it was kind of an attractive storefront as you're driving down. You're not seeing these seas of cars, and instead you're seeing the actual building. What we have found is that over time, people don't really like that. From a business standpoint, you want to be able to demonstrate to potential customers that you have easy access to parking, so you want to show that up front. And then we actually also found that when you do allow parking at the rear, it doesn't get used anyway. Or at best, it gets used as staff parking. And so someone will say, oh yeah, I have 40 spots behind my building, but really all the customers park in the 3 up front or on the street anyway. And so this proposal to go to 18 meters goes back to sort of the traditional development style of parking in the front of these businesses, which is what you see in Macomb right now.
So I don't know if there's any clarification needed for that, but if not, a vote would be fantastic. Okay, now on to the liquor store. So liquor store to be permitted instead of discretionary in the C3 transitional commercial district. This was an amendment that was proposed to ensure that our liquor sales and our cannabis sales are dealt consistently within each land use district, and unfortunately this one was not included when we did the rather large scale cannabis bylaw amendments. So this is essentially a cleanup item to, go with what council and the group recommended. So if I could get a vote on that one. Okay. The next 2 are dealing with accessory dwelling units, and we're proposing to delete them as a use in both the C5 shopping center district and the regional shopping center district C6. So this would not be residential units that are rented out to tenants like we see in our downtown. This would be more a caretaker residence, so someone living at the mall to take care of the mall after hours. It's not a use we typically see in residential with those shopping centers, and don't really feel it's necessarily appropriate to have on those sites. So we're recommending making that change. So if there's a vote for that. Okay. The next one is outdoor storage yards. So this would provide a bit of flexibility to allow outdoor storage yards to be located on a lot within close proximity to the principal building or parcel. This would include a permit condition to determine the length of time that the outdoor storage yard can exist on the property. So basically, this provides a bit of flexibility for the expansion of existing businesses within Lacombe. They need to expand their outdoor storage, but they don't have access to a lot that is adjacent to that property. I don't know if Deb has a bit more to add on that one.
This wouldn't include 2 different subdivisions. It would be close proximity, it would be kitty cornered, 2 lots away across the street, rather than in West Jackson and Len Thompson. That's not close proximity.
And if there's a need for clarification on that one.
So in the past, there's been kind of a resistance to storage yards, and just to clarify, this is not storage developments like multi-unit storage. It's like if I had a pipe fitting business and then I was going to store equipment somewhere else. And there's been sort of a hesitance to endorse those because, of course, the assessed value of a storage lot is very, very low. But what we're seeing is that some of the businesses that we have in town actually require a storage yard or a storage component for successfully running their business. So although that actual property might be assessed very low, when you look at it as part of the overall development, we think it's a valuable thing for the community.
So if I could get a vote on that one. Okay. The next couple are about cannabis. So this would be for the I-1, cannabis production and distribution major, to be added as a permitted use. And this was also an amendment that was intended to be included in the cannabis bylaw amendments, but was unintentionally excluded, as well as the I-2, which would add the cannabis production, distribution, major, and minor as permitted uses into that district as well. So these 3 items are essentially cleanup items to basically complete what was intended for the cannabis sales in the community. So if I could get a vote on that. Okay, thank you. The next section is landscaping. So we did take a look at our existing landscaping. So the first one is for residential multi-unit dwelling unit R5 and our residential apartment district R6, that a minimum of 25% of the lot be landscaped. So currently our standard is a 3-meter landscaping strip along the property line that borders public roadways. But with this, it would provide additional flexibility for developers of high-density developments, so apartment buildings, for instance, to provide landscaping throughout their site, where it can be used for screening, to buffer an amenity area for tenants, and things of that nature. We did do a search of our existing new high-density sites, so the apartments in Mackenzie Ranch and Trinity Crossing, and our new high-density sites currently have been providing between 21% and 32% landscaping. So they've been meeting around that target goal. They, of course, as with anything, can apply for a variance, and that could be supported if what they're providing is high quality landscaping that maybe meets the need but in a slightly smaller space. So I'll leave you guys to vote on that one.
Sorry, I'd like to point out that if you passed the one earlier with changing R6 to 75%, there's nothing left for parking. 25% landscaping and 75% building.
Typically, we found that the apartment buildings do not cover 75%. mainly because we're not seeing underground parking provided. So I think usually the buildings are probably closer to 30% lot coverage perhaps.
So the proposed, and just to highlight, the proposed change for the R5 zoning is actually to lower it from a max of 75 to a max of 65. But Planner Kirschner's right, that's the maximum. Typically we're seeing like 30% or less for either our R5 and R6 lots.
And I would just add to that typically when a developer is proposing a site, he's taking into consideration the site coverage, the parking requirements, where the garbage is going to be located, and any of the landscaping. And typically we would want to see in some of these larger apartments, and frankly I think the developers have done a really good job of these two developments in particular in making sure that the landscaping and the amenities there are adequate for their tenants.
So now if we could get a vote on that one. Okay. The next one is downtown commercial district, so C1, C2, C5, and C6. Either a minimum of 10% of the lot be landscaped, or the 3-meter landscape strip along the property boundaries with public roads. So again, this provides a bit of flexibility. They can go with the traditional 3 meters, but it gives them that option if they want to have landscaping incorporated more throughout the property, maybe closer to the building or the front doorway. It provides them just with some options so that they don't have to stick with the standard. So flexibility is always great. 10% would probably be very similar to what the 3-meter boundary strip would account for anyway. And I don't know if you have anything to add on that.
Probably not. Obviously, more landscaping, especially in these commercial and industrial areas, does, really adds a lot to the development. And in some cases, we've seen, 15 to 20%, 25%. And one of the newer developments, which we'll get into I-1, they actually have 37% of the front yard landscaped. And it does make the landscaping more attractive, but by leaving the 3 meters as an option, they can also go with that.
So I don't know if there's any questions on that. But if not, if I could get a vote on that, that would be fantastic. Thank you. Okay, the next one is so the other commercial districts, so C3, C4, UC, which is our University Commercial District, and CS, which is our Community Services District. And that would be either a minimum of 15% of the lot being landscaped, or respectively that 3-meter landscape strip. So these are our lots where we're typically seeing that capacity in there for that type of development. So if there's questions for that one. If not, if I could get a vote, that would be great. Thank you. Light industrial district, so either a minimum of 25% of just the front yard setback, or the 3-meter landscape strip along the property boundaries. And for corner lots, they would have an additional requirement to provide that landscaping strip on their side yard adjacent to the road. So yet again, it's sort of the same rationale as with the other stuff is, it improves the flexibility or options for the developer. And with those I-1s, we've typically been seeing that type of landscaping occurring. Probably it's just been the kind of that natural buffer that they've been providing to separate their development, their parking from the road itself. I don't know if you have anything on that.
The only thing I'd add is you are seeing more or higher landscaping standards coming into effect, and it does make everything more attractive in all our districts.
So I don't know if I could get a vote on that one. Okay. The next one is heavy industrial, so that would be either the minimum of 20% of the front yard or that landscaping strip with the same additional requirement for the corner lot. So slightly less of a standard than the light industrial, but provides a bit more flexibility for what we might see and can really soften up some of those really heavy industrial uses that we occasionally get in our industrial park. There's a vote for that. Okay. The next one is in regards to residential. So currently our R4 parcel does not have a requirement for developments that happen to be 7 units or higher. We don't have many of these, but it's always good to have a standard in case someone comes forward with that development. And we would be suggesting that if you're developing 7 unit or more dwelling units on an R4 parcel, that 25% of the lot be landscaped. And currently, developments from 1 to 6 units, it's the standard is based on 1 tree or X number of shrubs per dwelling unit to be provided on the lot. So just prevents it from getting potentially overdeveloped with trees and shrubs. A bit more flexibility for how that's taken. So now if there's any questions on that, or if we just get a vote. Oh, and of course variances. If I don't say it, pretty much majority of our stuff, variances can be asked for. Okay, the next one is our tree planting standard. So currently it's 1 tree per 50 meters squared, and we're suggesting 1 tree per 60 meters squared. This will help ensure that there's adequate space between the trees for them to sufficiently grow to their capacity. And it's also standard, we noticed that 1 per 60 is what a lot of the other municipalities tend to have. So a bit more spacing, and sometimes a less is more approach with trees is better for safety. So get a vote on that. Thank you. The next one is in regards to mature trees, so city-owned mature trees in particular. So occasionally with the development, city-owned trees will have to be removed in order to facilitate it. Currently, they have to be replaced at a 3-to-1 ratio. So every tree you take down, 3 more have to go up. We're recommending a 1-to-1 ratio. And this is really to ensure that when those trees are removed and new trees are planted, it's maintaining the existing spacing pattern between the trees. So if you think some of our tree-lined streets, if a couple trees are removed, rather than just clustering a whole bunch more, you're respecting that pattern that you have. So it's slightly less, but probably better use of the trees that are being planted. If there's any clarification on that one needed, but if not, a vote would be great. Thank you. Okay, and then last category is other proposed amendments, so things that didn't neatly fit into those others. So suggested deletion of medical marijuana facility. Since cannabis is now legalized, we do no longer have a use requirement to have that use within our land use bylaw. So vote on that. Okay. The next one is that the development officer shall be authorized to consider and decide upon development permit applications that would normally be considered by our planning commission. So this would be things like variances over 10%, discretionary uses, things like that. In situations where the application has been referred to all the adjacent neighbors and there have been no concerns or objections raised. So essentially with this, there's a lot of scenarios where maybe they're asking for 11% variance, or they want to open a hair salon, which is a home occupation too. If there's no concern by the neighbors raised, and in scenarios where the development officers don't anticipate any issues with that type of use, it can simply be approved in-house, and will no longer have to go to the Planning Commission. So it'll save the commission members some time, it'll help streamline the process, and it'll reduce the time period slightly. It'll still be advertised, there still will be an appeal period, but it just saves that time for scheduling the meeting, going to the meeting, and those processes. And that is something that I think came out of discussion at previous council meetings and by members of the commission itself. So if there's any need for clarification on that one.
And I'd also mention that in any case, anything controversial or anything that would raise a question, a development authority or officer would refer this application to MPC. They would never, unless it's pretty sure that it's going to be approved at MPC.
Chief Cody?
So just because we are going through so many items, I want to highlight this one as one of what I would personally consider one of the top 3 changes that are being proposed. And I would say that those 3 are the C1 parking requirements, removing those. That's a big change for Lacombe that has been around for a long time. This one of allowing the development officer to approve discretionary items, things that would normally go to MPC when there's no objections or concerns raised. And then the one that Jen's going to go through in a moment, which is about dealing with existing buildings and occupancy permits again. Those are the 3 that I would say are the biggest 3 changes in these bylaw changes, and certainly 3 that I think will be really well received by the development community.
So if I could get a vote on that one. Excellent. The next one, as CAO Gowdy mentioned, is in regards to occupancy permits and existing development. So currently within our bylaw, anytime someone wants to do an occupancy and the file has been closed compliant, they often have to upgrade to meet our current bylaw regulations. So this would create a couple layers. So the first one would be if the development of the building has been closed compliant, and the occupant, then in that case, the occupancy will not be required to meet the additional conditions. So it's basically acknowledging you did it right the first time, you're good to go, you continue operating. The second scenario is if the development of the building has not been closed compliant, the occupancy permit may require additional conditions. So that provides some flexibility if, let's say it wasn't closed compliant because of something aesthetic, then they may not require additional requirements, but it provides flexibility if, they really didn't meet their paving standards or something, then they'd have to really upgrade to meet our expectations. And then the third is if an addition or a new building is proposed for an existing site, all site development conditions as per the current land use bylaw will be in effect. So if they're building a new building or a large addition, they will have to upgrade their site to meet our current standards. But if the addition or the new buildings are less than 5% in size of the existing building or less than 15 meters squared, we would not require them to upgrade. So that would be if they're maybe adding a new entranceway to prevent wind from entering their building, or they're adding a small storage shed required for their business, then it wouldn't be required. So it's providing different layers of flexibility for different scenarios. But it will help in those scenarios where they've done everything right. They're just because an occupancy is coming in, it's not going to require more parking to be constructed on the site. So I don't know if there's any clarification needed on that one.
So just to highlight where this has come up for us before would be there's one situation that jumps out for me where the city looked terrible. where we had a development that was closed compliant in Wolf Creek Industrial. The guy uses the building for 20 years or something. He goes to rent it out to someone doing the exact same business as he had been doing in that space. And then we look at it and say, well, actually, our new requirements have landscaping, you gotta pave the whole thing. And it was like hundreds of thousands of dollars that this building owner would suddenly face to continue doing the business that he had been doing forever. And he had met all the requirements. And so it puts our staff in a bad spot where you're sort of like, well, this is the standard. This will give us some flexibility to say, well, no, when you've met all the standards with your building and nothing new is happening, then we're not going to insist on a bunch of new requirements.
Okay, if everyone's good on that, if I could get a vote, that would be super. Excellent. The next one is...
Just one question on Highway 2A. There was a person that went from to a different, from what kind of commercial retail. So therefore then, is that kind of still going to, is that going to exempt that as well?
Could you give me a little more?
Okay, we can't, I probably shouldn't, I'm not going to name specific, but.
So tell me the background one more time.
Well, as the business was before, it was gravel, and then to whether the zoning of this specific, I'm assuming, changed, then that brings into play that it's now supposed to be paved and so forth. Is that?
So if you were to rezone a property, that would typically, you'd have to meet the new standards. But if I'm thinking of the same one as you're talking about, then there wasn't any rezoning in place, and if they met the standards of the day at that time, we wouldn't ask them to meet the new standards today.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. The next one is prohibition of election signs on properties being used for voting stations. This one came up because during the last provincial election, a lot of signs had to be removed on a regular basis. So this will just allow us to comply with legal standards as to how elections need to be run and that separation of space. So, any clarification, but a vote on that would be great. Thank you. The next one is in regards to the crime prevention through environmental design section. We have simply are recommending to relocate it to the same section where our landscaping requirements are. Often crime prevention through environmental design ties nicely with landscaping, and this will really encourage people to look at that whole section and those different components together collectively. So not a huge change, just really moving a lot of text from one space in our bylaw to another. So if I could get a vote on that. Okay. The next one, dwelling units should not be located within 30 meters of our north-south railway line and 15 meters from the east-west railway line. So these setbacks are based on recommendations established by the Federation of Canadian Municipalities in conjunction with the Railway Association of Canada. So it's just really encouraging that you're not locating housing units within close proximity of the railway. It's for reasons such as noise, contamination, other safety requirements. We don't believe we actually have any dwelling units that are within that space currently, but it is a standard that we've seen recommended. If there's any questions on that one or clarification needed? If not, a vote on that would be great. Thank you. We're almost done, I promise. Provide additional allowance for development authority to request site triangles. This is basically in scenarios where there is a concern that sight lines for that property with new development may be compromised. Then development officers can request additional studies on that to ensure safety. for how that site is being developed. So it could be based on how the building is being proposed to be located on the site, or proposed landscaping, or if there is an existing sightline issue that could be exacerbated. So if there's a vote for that one. Okay. And the last one is to allow spot zoning for CS, that's community service lots within the residential district. So currently, neighborhood commercial lots can exist within the residential district, so because they are neighborhood commercial. But the thought with allowing CS lots is to really support the existing uses and land use patterns we have. Our CS lots include our churches, our museums, our schools, community use buildings, and these buildings and types of uses are traditionally located in our residential areas, and the neighborhoods, for instance, really benefit from their close proximity to these spaces. So this will just allow us, if there's a scenario in the future, to be able to support that application for rezoning when it goes to council. I think the last ones we've had were all for church spaces, existing church spaces, but it could be any type of nonprofit that might come forward with a perfect location, but just needs the zoning in place. So I don't know if I can get a vote on that one. Thank you. So those are basically all of them, except for the minor ones that I just very briefly mentioned at the beginning. And we do have in here what we're proposing as a bit of a time frame for moving forward, and how you would propose to engage with the developers. So we would be proposing that kind of during the next week or so, we would be preparing letters to send to all of our active developers within the community. And these letters would highlight proposed changes for things like site coverage, landscaping, setbacks, and parking. And we'll outline some of the methods for providing feedback. So written submissions, or being able to attend the public hearings when they occur. And theoretically, perhaps a first reading of one of the bylaws could move forward at the end of May. We would continue with kind of our normal public hearing notifications, as well as maybe some additional Facebook posts to really direct individuals to where the information is on our website, with a theoretical public hearing date at the end of June. So there's some changes that we'd like to ideally move forward with if there's council support, and there's some that, at least one that a resident is kind of waiting to hear how that might play out. That's kind of basically what we're envisioning, but we're open, obviously, to recommendations by council as to whether they want something more expanded or a bit different of a timeline.
Thank you. Councillor Ross?
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. So in some previous public hearings that have brought forth to council of a potential development, for example, in myself, it seems more common sense to have a fourplex or sixplex on a corner lot, which obviously you have more parking availability. And it seemed to be a concern of residents, a demolition of a lot between two corners on the street is more acceptable of a duplex than a fourplex or a sixplex because of the density of crowding, parking, and so forth. Has previous public hearings been taken into consideration of concerns of the residents in that regards? Because in the same sense, the return of the investment of the developer on a purchase of a lot for its potential obviously dictates the value. So, and yet you're still trying to have a balance between to not interfere with the value of the lot, yet there's been concerns of residents brought forth in terms of we can have a full gallery and sit here for an hour and a half listening to letters that was really against the previous, or the current 400 one. So I just wonder if we've addressed that somewhere.
So some of the changes that were brought forward for the R4 parking were directly in response to those. Do I think you're going to not have galleries full of people opposed to redevelopment? No, I'm not naive. You're going to have that, whether you have parking in the front, parking in the rear. There's often a built-in resistance to infill development, just because of the change that's associated with that. I do think some of these changes will address the parking concerns specifically. In particular, asking parking to be more consistent with the existing development, I think will help address that. I don't know that it's going to stop it at the front end though, because people are used to seeing infill development look a certain way. They have an impression of what it looks like, and so when those developments come forward, people will automatically jump to those views of what they have seen development.
Pardon me, another concern is, okay, for example, when there's a new development, be it Henners, for example, and 10% was to be multifamily, like duplexes, or whatever the case would be, of the total development from the initial start of it. But yet, no disrespect, but all downtown we're seeing is duplexes and fourplexes and all these bigger lots. And sometimes I think, do we need to have a stronger consultation? Is that the vision we want for downtown? I know it's more viable in terms of providing the services and more return tax-wise, but is that the vision we want for downtown, to go from kind of like the aesthetic trees, bigger lots, to all duplexes, fourplexes, sixplexes? Because you don't very often see that big lot filled in with a single family, like a single family housing. So it's kind of like, that's something I think we need to kind of consider in terms of the public hearing, to directly ask that question, because that's, if you designate certain areas, once you over a certain percentage, then no more of them demolition of a lot for the purpose of a duplex, fourplex, sixplex, and it's hard to, I just think that should be brought forward to have the people have that voice, I guess.
So one thing that maybe we didn't highlight at the beginning was that in your strategic plan, you actually talk about both the land use bylaw and the municipal development plan. What you're talking about is it's actually a 30% requirement for multifamily housing in new developments, but that would lie in the municipal development plan. And sort of those big, broad stroke, how does your community look? That does lie in the municipal development plan. But if you're looking at the sort of on the street, how does my neighbor's infill development look when he does it? That's the land use bylaw. If you want to address sort of those infill percentages, densification percentages, multifamily, that is a municipal development plan thing. That's for new development. I think you would face a real challenge in trying to sort of artificially put a bubble around the downtown and say it shall remain single-family homes, because every community, as they go through these growth patterns, that's the natural tendency of things. And so you're really, I would say, artificially affecting the market if you were to say, actually, we're just going to have a limit on the amount of multifamily housing we have in a specific area, because developers are making those decisions based on the economics. And it is more, it's not just for the city, it's for the developer as well. It is more economical to be able to put up multiple houses on the same lot than one house.
Councilor Jacobson?
Oh, I was just going to add that I would very much like to have the discussion that Councillor Ross is talking about, to share some perspective on why those types of decisions are made. But I guess the CAF said it for me. I thought it was probably more in the context of an MDP discussion as opposed to an LUP discussion.
Councilor Gibbs?
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. So just two things. With regards to the schedule, I'm just wondering if there's maybe some consideration for maybe the Chamber of Commerce being sort of notified as well, because I hear this occasionally from business owners in town, particularly those that aren't necessarily residents of this community. They may not be quite as aware of some of the activity that's happening within council chambers or at City Hall. So, perhaps some, outreach there. It's also maybe an added incentive for local businesses to belong to the chamber, but that's for them to sort out. I guess the only comment that I would make overall on these proposals that have been brought, I'm glad that we're going to have this discussion. I have to say though, one thing that I feel like was perhaps omitted was maybe a look at an R4 lot coverage. I do feel that does come up quite often at NPC, so I'm a little bit disappointed to see that I don't believe that was covered in here at R5, R6, but I don't recall seeing R4, but I could be incorrect. So I guess that would be my only comment.
So I believe, we're just going to check, our R4 lot coverage, I think, is 55%. So the idea was R4 would be 55%, R5 would be 65%, and R6 would be 75%. So a bit of a progression, I guess would be the best way to put it. But we're just double checking.
But we haven't proposed a change.
No.
So it would establish that steps, but if we're looking for less intense development on R4 lots, I would say we should recommend a change.
Yeah, so it is currently 55%.
And one of the items that will affect our R4 zoning is if a front attached garage is not provided, parking will be in the rear. So in order to fit everything onto that lot, you'll have to have all the parking in the back, which would equate for about 9 spaces, because you would provide 2 spaces per unit plus 1 visitor parking.
Councillor Gullickson.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. Yeah, I feel that some of the problems we've had with the R4 has been addressed with those parking changes. But I really would like to have our zoning be very clear to developers, so we don't have issues where people buy a lot with an expectation to build a certain structure and they can't. And they come to MPC or to us and want us to approve it. And I would like our zoning to be really clear and give the developers exactly what they can do in those areas, whether it's R4 or R3 or whatever it is. And I think we're moving in that direction, but I think there's some more clarification that can be made to ensure that when they purchase a lot, they know what they can do.
Councillor Jacobson?
So I guess maybe to clear, sorry, would you like, if there's other things you want to see looked at, is this the time to bring them up? Okay, so I concur. I believe the R4 zoning is the most problematic zoning in the land use bylaw period. I absolutely hate it. Okay, so at the very least, I would like to see some suggestions from the administration on how to remove all the discretionary uses out of that thing and make them a big list of permitted uses. Because probably the biggest, to speak to Councillor Gullickson's point, the biggest issue with it is it's so discretionary. You're really, frankly, at the mercy of whoever shows up to the Municipal Planning Commission for that evening. And there's no, and because it tends to be a board that fluctuates all the time, there's no real sense of consistency. That was what I'm looking for. I don't know. There's no common thread to it. You get a decision 1 week, and you'll have the same thing that comes back, a month later, and there'll be nothing will follow. So, I would genuinely like to see, if at all possible, frankly, I wouldn't mind the whole thing being removed, to be frank with you. But at the very least, dramatically lower the amount of discretionary uses on it, and also I'd specifically like to have it looked at there's a particularly frustrating one with side yards in R4, where if you're accessing your front door from the side yard, your building has to be 2.4 meters for side yards. But I come into this a lot with my multifamily buildings, where even if the front door faces the street, but it's being accessed from the side yard, it automatically makes the building have to have a 2.4 meter side yard. And of course you can apply for relaxation, so it's always frustrating. So I'd like that looked at as well too in the R4. So all in all, yeah, R4, it just needs to be gutted and redone, frankly. Okay. So I would like to see an extreme focus put on that.
I would just have to concur. It is a problematic district, and that 2.4 meters, it's a bit of interpretation too, because in some cases, even though the front door or what have you may appear to be in the side yard, it's facing the front, so it's an interpretation, and in a lot of cases you would need that 2.4, but the R4 district is very problematic, and that is possibly one district that should be looked at on its own as a separate bylaw amendment. You know, do what we can in this bylaw, and then take a really good long hard look, and even have a group go through it.
In the meantime, obviously, you've got the ear of manager of the planning department, so I look forward to seeing what the gutted version looks like when you come back. Chief Gowdy?
So I was just going to suggest what Manager Bonnet has suggested, that what we'll do is we'll move forward with these changes, and we will concurrently bring a special focus on R4 type bylaw and discussion, so that we can really have a focus on the R4 usage without sort of holding up this process. So we'll be running actually potentially 3 separate bylaws, the simple ones, then the ones we've discussed tonight, and then an R4 one, probably slightly a step behind, which may slow down some of this consultation with developers. We'll have to talk about that.
Councillor Huchar?
Thanks, Mayor Creasy. Yeah, I'm not super involved in this process, but I was looking at the communication piece in terms of sending letters to all the active developers, and communication is a big thing nowadays, and the actual letter, so many people use the excuse nowadays that they haven't received the letter, and I just wonder how many active developers we have, and if there's some kind of read receipt process we could attach to that, so we would never have a significant developer come back at us and say we didn't get the letter. I don't know, communication seems like, I don't know, people are always emailing and then they say they never got the paper letter. Is that a possibility?
You know, in most cases, we have the developer's email address and his mailing address, and I don't see that it would be that a real hardship to do both, you know.
Yeah, and with the email, we can have that little read receipt on there, so we know for sure that they've at least opened the email.
I would just like to add, for something like this, it is important that we do reach our developers and that they're aware of the changes we're contemplating. Let's say in addition to suggestions, we would reach out by phone and just connect with them, understand that they have received that, or at least to be aware of the letter that's coming. And so we'll make sure to do that as well.
Anything else before we move on? Thanks, Planning and Development. We appreciate it. Excuse me, next up, under Community Services for Corporate Media Training Session, Director Juke, do you want to take us through this item?
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. Yes, before the committee tonight is a report just advising the committee that administration has booked a corporate media relations training session, or will be shortly booking one. And we wanted to propose it to council and just get a read on your interest level and find out how many people would like to participate in it and get an idea of your preferred date. So the purpose of the training session is to provide elected officials and administrative leaders the tricks and tips for dealing with media relations and ensuring that their message gets through when they're speaking with the media both on television, with print media, and potentially also with social media platforms, online views and in particular. Administration has 2 dates that we are proposing. One is Thursday, June 28th, which is fairly recent or fairly soon. And the other one is quite a bit further out. It's on Friday, August 30th. I just want to mention that one's quite close to Labor Day and may interfere with holidays. They're all-day session. It's an all-day session that we're proposing taking place here at Council Chambers in City Hall. The facilitator is an award-winning Canadian journalist who has been to Lacombe before. He did a training workshop here in 2013. And just one further point, this training opportunity aligns favorably with Council's strategic goal to make the work of Council more accessible, open and accessible government. So we're proposing that Council just take this under consideration and get back to, I guess, me with whether or not you'd like to attend and which date is your preferred date. And if we can do that within 1 week, by May 13th, that'd be great. And then I guess it'll be majority rules. And administration will attend whichever session date Council prefers.
June 28th, right before long weekend.
So is there councillors that would prefer to have some time to consider their options? Are you prepared to advise administration of your preference this evening? It's my expectation the majority would just assume tell you now, so you know. And in case anybody's worried about starting, I'll go, and I have a preference for June 28th. But that would be a yes, and June 28th then, I guess.
I'll go yes, June 28th.
Yeah, 28th. So I had a question. June 28th is a Friday, and it says here Thursday, June 28th.
It's Friday.
So, just wanted to be clear, is it the Thursday the 27th or the 28th?
June 28th is the date.
Yeah.
So just to clarify, it is June 28th. It's Friday, June 28th. Thank you for me.
So it's the day before the weekend too. Same way as ours. Pick your own weekend.
June 28th is a parade in Panoka.
Penalto. Big word, Penalto.
Panoka.
Pretty important.
I love Fridays, but yeah, I would rather than be August 30th, but those are really not great dates, sorry.
I like the Thursday.
Can we not have the option of calling back and asking for a non-day before, both of them are before all weekends?
Yes, we can. And we'll bring it, sorry. Yes, we can, and we'll bring it back to you next meeting to get your preferences.
Sorry, that's just kind of Thursday.
We didn't realize, we thought it was a Thursday, so that's no problem at all.
And just to clarify, there were additional dates. We just had to pick 2 for this report. So we'll find another date that works better.
Great, thank you.
Can we just send that in an email?
Well, and
Yes, we can.
I'm sorry, receive the information about the choices?
Yeah, so like if we could just say that, yes, we support this idea for a date to be selected later or agreed upon by something like email versus, so we don't have to, you know,
Wait for
wait,
the meeting.
exactly, right?
That sounds great. Thank you.
Councillor Jacobson, did you have something else, or just like,
sorry.
well, no worries. And Director Piche, Alberta Law Enforcement Response Team, the Alert Advisory Committee, you want to go through that, please?
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. So before council tonight is information regarding an invitation to participate on a civilian advisory committee for the Alberta Law Enforcement Review or Response Team. The AUMA was asked to extend this invitation on behalf of the Alert Team to various municipalities as per their terms of reference. For this one, of the alert team, they state that they need a representative from a community with a population of 5,000 to 50,000 with a municipal police force for a representative to sit on that committee. In the province of Alberta, there's actually only 3 communities that are eligible for this group of representatives, and that is the town of Taber, the city of Camrose, and the city of Lacombe. The purpose of this committee is to provide feedback between the stakeholders and the alert team. There will be a time commitment to sit on this committee with no remuneration, but there will be a reimbursement of expenses. And because there's no substitution and it is a dedicated time, it was felt that maybe a staff member would better be suited for this role. So after discussions with CAO Gowdy, we felt that I should apply to participate on this committee. But at this time, if there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Chief Gowdy?
So, although it is a committee meeting, we are looking for a pretty strong indication if there's any different way you want to proceed, because they actually give us very little notice. May 13th is the first meeting, 14th, sorry, in Banff. So we kind of want to make some arrangements quickly for whoever is going to participate.
Well, I wasn't really interested, but now that I found out it's in Banff, I think I want to go. I'm just kidding. By no means. Does anybody have any objection to Director Piche attending the alert meetings on our behalf? Is that a strong enough indication for you? Perfect.
You go on one page.
So, just with respect to our next meetings, which is a meeting question we discussed, our June 3rd meeting, which is a committee meeting on here that's listed under next meetings, I would suggest that we need to eliminate that because it is not possible for us to have quorum. There's only 3 councillors that will be in the province during that time, so we will be unable to reach quorum unless it's done electronically, which for a committee meeting I would think would not be very productive.
Who's missing? Should be 4 of us.
Councillor Gullickson's gone, in addition to the FCM attendees. So that leaves 3.
We're back. I fly back on the Sunday. I don't know when you're flying.
We were supposed to fly back on Monday, but I'm coming back Sunday.
Yeah, Sunday night it's done. Sunday by noon it's done.
No, it's not done till Sunday.
No, so it's not till Sunday.
Or Sunday night, whatever.
Most people go back till Monday. It would be
But if you're coming back Sunday, you'll be back. And you're coming back, and we have 4.
Well, I don't get back till 1 a.m., but I'll get back.
And it's committee, we should.
perfect. Well, if those changes in mind, if you're leaving FCM early and care to take that in, so be it. It'll say.
Make sure to be here for the meeting.
It'll be drawn and quartered now should you not make it,
Who's
but
deputy mayor in June?
Whoever is right now, which would be you, I believe.
So we'd have to change that.
It's a committee meeting.
Whoops. I didn't start.
You get to chair.
Yes.
how fortunate
I
can it
will
be?
not have any time to prepare and I need to.
It's a committee meeting.
I know.
Very good, so that's all the business that we had for tonight, and it is 7:07, and we are adjourned. Thank you.
I would
love to share that.
It's my husband.